All right, it looks like we are live. We got people coming in already. I'm going to drop the opening. Let's drop the opening.
Welcome back to the hankstrange situation.
That's right.
Lifestyles
Subscribe, thumbs up, ring the bell so you could be notified. We are live. We are live. Let's do jazz hands. It's just me and Babyface P right now. We are still waiting for Adam. Oh, it looks like I just heard from him. Did you just see that?
Just got a message. Yep.
Yeah, see if you can add him in.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have hit. Let me see. We're gonna go here.
Yeah. So hold on a second, guys. Just stand by with us. Thumbs ups right now. Share all that kind of stuff. This is episode 395. Who is Adam Kokesh, Libertarian running for president 2020? And we're trying to get him in here. I'm trying to see. Hold on. Let me try.
I'm calling him right now.
Okay, I was gonna say. Let me see if I can add him. Either one way or the other. We'll see. Maybe we'll get him. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So
Hey guys, sorry to be cutting close.
Yeah, no, that's cool,
Just kind
man.
of hectic day on situated.
Okay,
There we go.
Yeah, you're coming in a little broken up. I'm gonna try to, and I think you have to turn your camera on so we can see you.
No, it's working. It's working.
Oh, I don't see. Wait, how come I don't see?
I can see him in Skype.
Oh, you can?
You gotta add the video to the stream, right?
Hey guys, let me. Can you call me? Or can I call back and? Well, let me see. I need to turn my ringer off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give
Go
me just a
ahead.
second, I might
Yeah,
lose-
go ahead and do that. We've got time. No worries. All right, so everyone hanging out in there with us, thank you. Make sure you thumbs up, okay? Make sure you share this and all that kind of good stuff. Thanks to everyone for coming in. It's Friday. We have, did he hang up? He should be calling back.
Yeah, he's gonna call back. I think he said.
Yeah.
No, I'm still here.
Oh,
I didn't have to hang up. That's that.
There we go.
okay. Yeah, but I still don't see Adam.
I can see him.
Okay, I just see a big Skype thing. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Got to try to figure that out. I'm just seeing... Adam, do you mind... Let's see, maybe hang up and I'll call back.
Sure.
Yeah, because video's not coming in on my end. So if you don't mind, hang up and then I'll call you right back.
Back on? No.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's see. Did he hang up? I think so. All right, let me try to add him back in here and see what happens. Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Just hang in
This is
there
a
with
disaster
us.
for Friday already.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go.
I see him now.
I can see him.
Boom.
All right.
There he goes. All right. I think we got Adam on. So it looks like he's coming in from the farm. What's up, Adam? Oh.
I even got flies in the background here. I'm trying to
Yeah.
shoo out of the room. How's that for farm authentic?
Yeah. So let me try to get this all started all over again. If everyone's joining us right now, this is the Who Moved My Freedom podcast. It's episode 395. The title is Who is Adam Kokesh, Libertarian running for president 2020. You see him on the screen here if you're joining us live and checking it out. And a big shout out to Franklin Armory, our sponsors, for allowing us to, helping us to be able to actually put all these on. We've got Babyface P here. We've got Adam here. You don't know either one of us, Adam, but welcome to the show. And where you say that again?
Thank you, Hank. Thank you, P.
Yes. Where are you calling us from?
I am in at an undisclosed location.
Looks like a secret bunker.
Yeah.
It kind of is. I'll just say I'm in northern Arizona. I'm at my place.
Okay.
But I'm limited for legal reasons as to how much I can say about Freedom Farm. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm living in a building that I made with my own two hands and some help from some and living completely off grid, and I love it out here.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
Okay, completely off grid. That's awesome, man. I respect that. Very cool. So if, for the folks out there who don't know who you are, that's where I would usually like to start. Plus, I've never had a conversation with you before. Our friend Joe from American Gun Chick, he suggested that we should get you on here. He's a good dude. He said...
Yeah, Mr. Ross, great guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was like, hey, if Joe likes him, let's look into him. And you know what? You've got, if you Google Adam Kokesh, some stuff's going to come back up on Google. You might see some mugshots.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah, you might see some infamous videos in front of the Capitol. Some good stuff. So how about telling us, Adam, you're running for president now, so what's your official introduction of yourself to folks?
Well, since you're going to introduce me as a presidential candidate, I have to start with that, because every time I'm introduced as a presidential candidate, a little part of me dies inside. And if I have to introduce myself as a presidential candidate, I usually vomit into my mouth at least a little bit. And I do take a really consistent, ethical, principled basis to my politics, my activism, in terms of the foundation of libertarianism, and we can get back into that if y'all want. But
yeah, we got time.
I'm not running for president as much as I am using my candidacy for president to turn this election and on whether or not the federal government should be allowed to exist at all. So just to be clear, Adam Kokesh being president is not an option. I did not sign up for that. I will not accept the job. And for those of you who have heard of Lord of the Rings, you know that when someone hands you the Ring of Power, there's really only one thing you're supposed to do with it, and that is throw it into the fire. So my platform could be summed up as localization of the federal government, or a peaceful, orderly, and responsible dissolution that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign native nations. So this gets us a lot more in line with the vision that the founders had for this country in a lot of ways. But I think it's the continuation of the American Revolution, and perhaps more of an evolutionary rather than revolutionary sense, our opportunity to lead the world forward in freedom again, the same way that the founders. And incidentally, we get to do it by overthrowing the biggest empire the world has ever seen again. So that's a kind of nice benefit of where we are right now in the American story. But that we have this sense of independence and self-reliance so ingrained in the American culture, the idea that we have allowed ourselves to be forced under a single national government is really un-American when you think about it. So I will be resigning on day one. Upon winning, it's not me taking office for a bit of time and any longer than is necessary to sign the paperwork. So I'm going to go in, and there might be sure.
No, I'm sorry. Okay,
yeah,
so...
no,
yeah,
like we could just jump into that for 2 hours, but if you want, that's the premise of the campaign.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into your background, you're saying you're just saying, because you're breaking up a little bit. I know you're out in the undisclosed location, so it might be a little difficult for the signal to come in. But okay. So first day. So let's say you win. Something happens in the world. Everyone in America, or most people in America, vote for Adam Kokesh. You're elected president. Your first thing is you're going to resign, and then what? What happens at that point?
Then I become the custodian of the federal government, or the bankruptcy agent. So immediately the states become sovereign, and any native tribal nation that wants to declare itself sovereign, as opposed to a subsidiary of the state that it falls into, can declare themselves sovereign as well. So you have that immediate effect of localization. But this is not an easy process. And I don't mean to oversimplify it. And this is where, a lot of politicians will play this game of, vote for me because I look good in a suit and I can make my talking points sound nice and appeal to you. And I am making, I think, at a different level, a distinct intellectual appeal to the American people to say we don't have to be united under one government to be united in American values. And this is a significant process that I'm proposing here. It's not like I'm going to snap my fingers and federal government goes away. Some agencies like the IRS, you can kind of just, send everybody home and sell the buildings, and that's okay. For things like the Department of Defense, for Social Security, for Department of Veterans Affairs, for so many others, there has to be a very thoughtful process in how we get those functions that are legitimate government functions down to the state level. And if you like, we can go agency by agency. But basically, if an agency is not providing a legitimate purpose, as in one that the people support or demand, like the IRS, Department of Education, Department of Energy, these are all regulatory federal agencies that don't really do anything except pass down mandates. They're just mechanisms of control. So, I should say of bribery and graft and corruption and so many other wonderful things we get out of the federal government. But so a lot of those agencies are simply just going to be liquidated. Some are going to be spun off. Now, I'm a veteran myself. If you couldn't tell from the crayons in my teeth, I was in the Marine Corps. I volunteered to go to Fallujah in 2004. I like to describe it as a little slice of combat, just enough to understand what it is. I've seen some enough horrific shit up close to know that we should never do that again. And so with the Department of Defense, there needs to be a process where you take the weaponry that is offensive, that is simply a tool of empire, control, or projecting power, as opposed to those which have legitimate defensive purposes, and you take those and apportion them among the states. And so you'd have 50 independent state militaries, but it would be just a temporary step on the way to the defense that our founders envisioned for this country of being a militia-based defense.
Okay, all right. So I know there's plenty of people out there probably having like a WTF moment based on what you're saying, but I think there's a philosophical reason behind it. So, we've got like 2 hours before we dig into that. We could probably backtrack a little bit, right? And give you a chance to explain to people who you are, how do you see yourself, philosophically wise, I guess. I don't know, for lack of better words. How'd you get here?
Well, my parents were vaguely anti-authoritarian. My mom, generally liberal. My dad, generally conservative. But they both taught me to distrust. And I wish they had taught me just a little bit better, because I ended up joining the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old. Actually, sorry, this is what I meant to say about the VA. I don't want to see the VA fundamentally, disbanded or anything, because it provides a legitimate purpose. I'd like to see it given to the veterans, have it owned and operated by the veterans population in this country. And I guarantee if you do that, you're not going to have 22 veteran suicides a day. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps when I was 17. I just wanted to have my life on the line for something I believed in. You guys know Full Metal Jacket?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The movie Full Metal Jacket? Yeah. As opposed to be an anti-war movie.
Okay.
There were two parts of that really motivated me to enlist, and one was, and I'll say this without it being a spoiler, but for what happens to one of the main characters at the end of the first half, I was like, wow, this is an experience that can drive some of that. I want to sign up for that challenge. And the other one, it's kind of sick. It's a line from Joker in the second half of the movie. I wanted to be the first kid on my block with a confirmed kill. And I really bought into militarism. And this is something that, if you don't mind me sidebar for a second here, this is something that has really been on my mind a lot lately. And especially since Memorial Day, just a couple weeks ago, I wrote a blog post about that, thinking about my fellow Marines who I saw die in Iraq, and what I said was that the great tragedy was not that they died, or that they died fighting for something that they believed in, or they died believing they were defending their fellow Americans, but that they died as soldiers thinking they were warriors. And I know I have to unpack that a little bit, but to me it's a very important distinction that a soldier is someone who marches in formation, follows orders, and essentially does what the politicians tell him to do.
Okay.
A warrior is someone who stands up for what is right and is willing to risk their life to protect the innocent, to stand up for justice, to maintain peace. And that's a really important distinction. And to me, that speaks to the core of the distinction between the militarism that we know in America today and a real warrior culture, militia-based defense that the founders had. And I think this shift, there's a big shift that's happening in the United States right now. When dudes came home from Vietnam, not only were they spat on in many ways, but they weren't really encouraged to speak out. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have the support groups. They didn't have all of the things that we have today that make the veterans community, a whole other thing partly because of the experience of Vietnam, things that have been built out since then. And this shift really has to come from within, from the people who are the warriors in this country. We have plenty of warriors. There's nothing wrong with a warrior culture, but it's been perverted with militarism into a culture of soldiering and obedience.
Okay.
As opposed to being independent-minded and actually fighting for justice. So I hope that's something that for your audience in particular might strike a chord. I assume you have
there's a bunch
in your audience.
Yeah, there's definitely some veterans in there, some guys that have served. From time to time, we have guys that are serving currently. So just to and Babyface, feel free to jump in there if you have any questions. But just to get your to pin down what you believe here. Are you a pacifist or not a pacifist, or
no? Absolutely not. It's very tempting. I think just as much as drinking yourself into a bottle and checking out from life is kind of an overreaction or a cop-out. I think pacifism as well is a bit of an emotionally reactionary cop-out. I'm a libertarian, and at the heart of libertarianism is the philosophy known as voluntarism, the idea that all human relationships should be voluntary. The biggest misunderstanding about libertarianism is that it's a political philosophy. It's not. It's an ethical philosophy applied to politics. And one of the mistakes we've made as a movement for a long time is kind of playing their game and saying, well, we're going to say libertarians about this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue, and it's really not. It's really about one issue at its core, which is that you own yourself as an independent human being. You own the body that your brain resides in. Your consciousness gives you an inherent control and a right to own your own body. And this is not so much a construct as an observation of reality. Some people say, how do you come to this? Well, it's just you think it through. And I never tell anybody, that you should agree with me because I said so. Everything about my message is, if you're going to agree with me, do it because it makes sense to you, because you've thought it through from your own experience, your own reason, your own evidence, your own logic.
Right, you understand it, or it made you think about something and come to some kind of conclusion within your own mind, because we all live in the world through our own perspective and our own understanding and decoding of whatever it is we see, right?
Thinking for yourself. Yeah. So this idea of self-ownership defines freedom and defines a standard of ethics that we describe as the non-aggression principle. So just getting to the idea of being a pacifist, and the complete distinction here is that people think, either you're a pacifist or you're not. But in terms of not pacifist, there's a whole different range of things, and a lot of them are just plain assholes. But if you say, I believe in the non-aggression principle, it means I'm not going to aggress against you. I'm not going to initiate force against you because that's ethically wrong. That's violating your self-ownership. But I reserve the right to use force and violence in defense of myself and in defense of my property.
Yeah.
And so that's the distinction. And this the question, and it's what's amazing is that, you know, we go through 12 years of government education, and there are two things you think would be really, really important that they teach you in government schools. And one is a definition of government. They don't teach that because they don't want you to know that the only real functional definition for government is that it's a territorial monopoly on force. But the other thing that they never teach is how do you know right and wrong. When is it okay to use violence against someone? You know, and for a lot of us, well, we play into this government notion of punishment as opposed to justice. And I'll just use cannabis here as the one obvious example. If I smoke cannabis and you don't like it, whether you're a cop or a politician or even the majority of my you say, well, we're going to grab you and we're going to lock you in a jail cell because you did something we didn't like, that's punishment. That's a crime in and of itself. You're violating my self-ownership. Yeah. Now, justice, on the other hand, is if I steal something from you, I have to return it or make you whole. That's justice. And so if they taught you this distinction in government schools growing up, so like this is right, this is wrong, here's a clear framework for this, you go, well, government's full of shit. You know, what the hell are we doing putting up with this unethical system where they say, well, this is righteous, this is the justice system, you know, and it's absolute nonsense. And if you just get, you know, the definition of those two concepts, like it really you can use that to decode the rest of the matrix if you want.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just get a chance and say a couple things here. So like I know I have a personal philosophy of like si vis pacem para bellum, if you've ever heard that. You know, which basically means if you seek peace, prepare for war. So it's not like I think I agree with you in that. I'm sure there's people out there who either agree with you, disagree with you. I agree with you in that, like, I'm a gun guy. I believe in the Second Amendment. That's a lot of what we talk about here, you know. But I'm not a gun guy because I want to, you know, exert some kind of force over other people or make other people afraid of me or bend other people's will to my own. I believe in this because I want to be able to defend my own will.
Right.
You know, my own property. Yes. Yeah. So, you know, go ahead.
Well, before you move on that, I'm a felon because of my gun rights activism. So I don't get to play with guns anymore. But for a long time, you know, not just being in the Marine Corps, but even in my personal life, I would conceal carry. I was an open carrier for handguns. You know, pretty much always owned an AR and a hunting rifle and some kind of handgun. And there's something that I really appreciate about the firearms or the gun community in America as a whole. And one of the things is this idea of de-escalating. And by the way, I will say one other thing. I still get to carry pepper spray. I sound like a dork here, right? On a gun show going, yeah, I carry pepper spray.
Do what you need to do to defend yourself, my friend. I mean, you know, I want to get into what happened to you, how you became a felon and lost your access to the Second Amendment, because I know that when I looked it up, I don't see any what I consider just reason for that. You know, but as far as I'm concerned, I think you need to do whatever you need to do to defend yourself, man.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, so I carry pepper spray now, and I open carry my breast cancer awareness pink pepper spray on my keychain and on my hip because I want people to know. Like, you know, I mean, for the same reason or similar reasons as you might open carry a firearm, I want I want it to be handy. I want it to be, you know, really, really, you know, quick draw there. But I always carried that when I had a firearm on me as well, or some kind of pepper spray. I think you need that ability to escalate force if you're going to interact. And a lot of people who carry firearms in America who do so responsibly, they know, hey, I don't have a lot of in-between options. It's my words and then I draw. You know, and you have to know if you're going to draw, like not even sight in on someone, but just that you're going to unholster a firearm in front of another person in a confrontational situation, like that's a bit that in and of itself is crossing some very important lines.
Yeah.
Drawing in on someone, sighting in on someone, that's crossing another big line, and actually using the firearm and shooting someone, taking someone's life or disabling them if that's an option, that's another big one.
Yeah.
And I think when I talk to gun owners about libertarianism as a ethical philosophy, I think there's an inherent receptiveness that's so beautiful, because everybody who has ever responsibly carried a firearm in any kind of public setting has had to think through, when is it okay to use this? And if you take that fundamental principle, it's really the non-aggression principle. You can't just draw a firearm on someone because you don't like what they're doing and you want to control them. No, but that's what government does. And even if they don't actually go around pointing guns at people, it's very easy to point out, like, hey, what happens if you don't pay your taxes? Eventually, they come and take your stuff. And if you resist them taking your stuff, they take you. And if you resist them taking you, you get physically assaulted. And if you resist that, you get shot. Everything government does is backed up ultimately by that threat of violence. And it's almost always being applied in an unethical way.
Yeah. So now let me just stop you here for a second. I think you made a good point there. I want to explain to we've got a lot of people in the chat. So everyone out there, please thumbs up. We appreciate that. Share it and all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna take some questions and things like that. Where I don't know if I don't think we're gonna get a chance to get deep into Adam's background, but I can tell you guys, if you Google him, there's lots of stuff. I was looking at an interview that you did with Joe Rogan years ago. I think like 6 years ago, man. You're like episode 2 something with Joe Rogan. So he's on 1500 and something now. So yeah, you're OG. You're OG with that. So there's lots of stuff people can do and go back and find out about Adam. But I think we're going in some good places here. So go ahead.
Yeah, so we can just if I can get a couple things out of the way on that count, on just, if I may say a few words about my resume before we get into the meat and potatoes here.
Sure. Yes.
So I have been a full-time activist since I got out of the Marine Corps, which was November 30, 2006. And my start was with Iraq Veterans Against the War. And a big part of my understanding of activism was being the one libertarian, not the one, but one of few libertarians in a movement full of lefties, and getting a lot of training and perspective and understanding from them, challenging the war crime that was the invasion and imposition of martial law and the occupation of Iraq. Excuse me. And when I got back from Iraq, I wasn't really awoke to this nature of the war yet. It wasn't until I got out, and I got in trouble. I got in trouble for bringing a pistol back from Iraq the first time.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to get into. That's one of the things I want to get into.
I mean, like,
once we get other stuff out of the way.
I want to give people a sense of, like, see if I can give people a table of contents of all the various stories here, because I've been a full-time activist. I kind of count my birth or my first day of full-time activism is March 19, 2003. No, I'm sorry, March 19, 2007, which was the 4-year anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, which was March 19, 2003. And we did a mock combat patrol street theater action in Washington, D.C. That was a lot of fun and first made me a national figure. But when you're coming back from Iraq and you've seen your buddies die in combat, and you've decided, I'm not going to crawl into a bottle and die, I'm going to fucking do something about this so that nobody else has to die unnecessarily, you really throw yourself into your activism with a certain, I mean, I don't want to say reckless abandon, but let's say the same gung-ho enthusiasm that you brought to the Marine Corps, but for the, all the guys and gals that I was working with in IVAW with the military. And we did a lot of civil disobedience type stuff. More of it was just stunt activism or street theater or protesting without a permit kind of civil disobedience, rather than we're going to challenge this law, like with the Jefferson Dance Party, where they said, you can't dance here. I said, well, arrest me for dancing and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
The two big things that I'm known for in civil disobedience are the Jefferson Dance Party, where I got choke slammed by a cop for dancing at the Jefferson Monument. You know, Thomas Jefferson, the great champion of freedom of speech. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah. I saw that video. People can find it out. It's still out there.
Yeah, that's back from 2011.
Yeah. By the way, you can't dance at all. But I mean, I can't dance either.
I know. Hey, well,
you're a horrible dancer, man.
Hey, can you guess what I was listening to while I was dancing before getting arrested?
I know. What were you listening to?
You Can Do It by Ice Cube. Very motivation music, you know. Put your back into it. Whether you're any good at it or not.
That's just a two-step. That's just a two-step, man.
Well, obviously, what I was doing, barely qualified as dancing by any definition, but apparently the cops thought it met the legal definition.
But you were standing up for freedom. You were standing up for freedom. That's the whole point of it. Someone ultimately here, like, this is one of the things, if I can get a couple of words in here, this is one of the things people have to understand. Like, we all talk about freedom in our circles, right? I'm in the gun world. Lots of people listening in here, gun world guys. We all talk about freedom, but ultimately you don't have it if you can't defend it. And in order to defend it, you have to stand up for it. You have to make people realize, like, hey, why is it that I can't dance here? What is wrong? What is so horrible for me to do at the Jefferson Memorial to dance? Why is that a bad thing? You know, so it may sound silly to people, it may sound ridiculous, but it's something that has to happen. People have to do this. This is how we change the world, right?
Yeah, and if I may tell a summary of the shotgun story next, because I'm actually talking. This is the first time I've been talking to a show that's really connected to the gun community, where I've gotten to think this through. But first, in terms of what you said about the dancing, we were challenging an unjust law. It's not the most important one. It's more symbolic. And by the way, we completely won in the sense that while we got arrested, we got our tickets dismissed, and we got the policy changed. So as a project of civil disobedience, as in there's an unjust law or policy or enforcement here, we're going to break it, we're going to call attention to it, we're going to challenge it in the courts, and we're going to get it changed. Absolute victory on the dancing laws at the Jefferson Memorial. But it's not significant. That's not what's important.
Right. So let's talk about the shotgun one. Sorry, but I just so to encapsulate the thing that happened with the shotgun, how did that one get started? Now were you living in DC?
Well, hold on. Before I get into that,
right.
I want to make one more point to bounce off what you said, Hank, because it was so important. And this is a line that I use to talk about why we should have a militia-based defense as opposed to a military-based defense. And I could talk for hours about that. To me, evolving past militarism, getting the warrior class to be warriors instead of soldiers is really one of the most important points in human progress or evolution right now, to say warriors are going to stand up for what's right instead of killing for politicians. But what I'll say is that the founders of this country knew that the best defense, the most efficient defense, and the only legitimate defense for a free people is a well-armed population that refuses to be governed by anyone. And as Gandhi proved, the well-armed part is optional. And really, it should be a backstop. It should be something that is only necessary in really small, isolated events. Like I think of the Bundy Ranch standoff at Bunkerville. I was there a couple of years ago for a fundraiser for them. Big supporters of what the Bundys did there. But that's what it really has to be about, like you said, Hank, is actively engaging and saying, no, we're not going to put up with this shit anymore. And yeah, if it comes down to it, we'll shoot you, but we really don't want to. We want you to see the light. We want you to do the right thing. So the shotgun incident came out of my idea to do an open carry march through Washington, D.C. There have been open carry marches before.
Right.
I've participated. It's not that big a deal where you have open
Now,
carry.
when did you float this? Because I did have like I don't usually do a lot of notes and stuff for when I talk to people, because I want to have like a natural conversation flow like this. But this is one of the things that I definitely made a note about, because I wanted to talk about this, like you said, because it specifically relates to the whole gun thing. I just want to pin everything down in time. When was it that you were doing this? What year? Do you remember?
This would have been July 4th, 2013.
13. Okay.
And the way I had originally set this up was, here's the Facebook event page. If we get 10,000 RSVPs by like a month before or something, then we'll go ahead and do it.
Okay.
And just declaring it alone, I mean, was so much fun. I mean, just triggering liberals left and right. You're going to bring guns in, you're going to walk around with guns in DC, and we were going to be as tame and non-confrontational as possible, like long guns only, muzzle down, totally unloaded, no ammo on you, to be barely violating DC law in that sense, and saying, no, we're asserting our right under the Second Amendment to do this. And it caused a significant firestorm in the gun community as well.
And that's what I was going to ask you, because I seem to remember this idea being floated and then it kind of disappeared. So I think at that time I was just starting to do what I'm doing now. So I wanted to know how you were received when you were floating that idea by the folks out there in the gun community. Because, people have sent me messages since I announced you were coming on, saying there were lots of guys in the gun community that were actually against what you wanted to do.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, that contrast in responses. And there were a lot of people who had it in the gun community who had the same response of the liberals, of making a bigger deal out of it than because there's kind of two ways that it could have gone if you think about it logistically. When we were going to muster right across the bridge on the Virginia side, where open carrying long guns is legal, and walk across the bridge, and we were coordinating with law enforcement. So if law enforcement put up a barricade there, well, we walk up to the barricade, we say, oh, well, here's what happened. Time to go, give a few speeches and go home.
Right.
Not a big deal. Option two, they start letting people in and they start arresting us as we cross the line, and then everybody else stops, gives a few speeches, and then they go home. No big deal. Option three, we get a police escort and we do this little 1 mile walk through Washington, D.C., and probably get some garbage thrown at us by the liberal residents there. But it wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to go to the White House and lock and load rounds and sight in on all the windows. It wasn't like that. It was very clearly a peaceful demonstration.
Okay.
And the split in the gun community being for or against was what was really interesting, because some people blew it up to be like, oh my God, this is a crazy thing. This is going to make gun owners look bad. And it's like, really? A peaceful, respectful, and yet very, very courageous in terms of walking into the belly of the beast kind of just demonstration, assertion of our rights. That's going to make I think what makes gun owners look bad is that we give money to the NRA, who we know is corrupt, and then act like they're going to solve the problem through lobbyists, politicians. Bullshit. That's what makes us look like a bunch of cowards.
Yeah, let me say this. Let me say this real quick, right? Let me just interject here for a second. So, that was 2013 when you did that, right? Yep. And I think that was around the whole, what we call the Fire Armageddon. That was right after the shooting in the Connecticut school.
Post-Sandy Hook.
Yeah, post-Sandy Hook. You had Obama in office. He said he was going to ban guns. Gun guys were getting pretty riled up and all that kind of stuff. But I think 2013, people didn't really think that. I think we still had this kind of mentality that things weren't going to happen. That they weren't really going to do this. I know there were lots of guys that went out there and bought a lot of guns. The prices of guns skyrocketed because everyone was buying it. But I don't think anyone was politically worried. And I think if we contrast that with today, where we have a Republican, supposedly, in the White House, I'm not going to lie, I voted for Trump. I wasn't going to vote for Hillary. There was a whole thing with the Libertarian Party. I wasn't really happy in terms of guns. Yeah, but right now we're looking at things, and Trump has banned bump stocks, which I think is going to lead into other things. There was no law made on that. They made up their own law. They're forcing it on people's executive order. Now that we recently had this thing in Virginia where supposedly, we don't know, the guy used a suppressor. Now Trump says he's going to take a look at that. I think this is kind of like if you try to put the two worlds in 2013 next to the one today, I think maybe in 2013 there could have been some gun guys that said, this guy's crazy. But today, those guys are like, oh, maybe we need to do something like this. Because we're coming to a point where...
Maybe that's... So you're saying that, like, in 2013, this was a few years ahead of its time, but now the move is better for it.
Maybe, because I think we're mad now, because we have who's supposed to be a Republican. And when Trump was elected, everyone gave Republicans a majority. And the guys didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to shore up the Second Amendment. And now we're looking at Republicans actually pulling away rights. And it comes back down to what we've all seen before, that this whole two-party system is working against all of us, which I think is your overall thing that you're saying. Big government, we need to dismantle it. We need to bring it down. And I think there's more gun guys today that are more upset than even in 2013, where people really did get activated a little bit under Obama. Maybe it was easier if you have like an Obama in the White House versus when you have a Republican. But I think there's gun guys today that are looking at this and going, oh yeah, maybe people need to see how serious we are. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead.
No. That's a really good point, and I hadn't considered that. Actually, kind of gives me a little inspiration. The thing is, I can't actually lead an armed march myself if I can't be armed, right? Unless I've got some black powder or some pre-1890 shotguns that are not legally firearms.
Yeah. There could still be a way symbolically for you to do it. I don't want to cut off the story of what happened.
Yeah, I would. Well, I guess let me finish the story, and then people know that I still have some credibility on this issue, right? But one more thing I'll say about the response in the gun community. There were people who were genuinely critical of this as a tactic, and I never got into the comments enough to get a sense of how relevant this next dynamic was. But someone on my team said, Adam, the reason why half the people in the gun community hate you is not because you might make them look bad with this action in terms of the how this reflects on the gun community as a whole. They're worried that this makes them look bad in the sense that it makes them look like cowards.
Maybe they didn't think of it. They didn't think about it.
No, not just that, but that they didn't get behind it. And I'll tell you about the numbers in a second here. But and I think it's very appropriate for people in the gun community when you pick up a gun, when you're talking about the issue of a tool to end human life, that you take that seriously, and there's a lot of serious language around that. But when you say, well, I wouldn't let them take my gun because I would go, well, will you march first before you'll shoot a gun grabber? Will you come on a march with me, or are you going to chicken out on that?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of that. And what I had said as the criteria for this was that we had to get 10,000 RSVPs on the Facebook page, knowing that a big chunk of those were going to be people who didn't show up or were just trolling. And of course, we had all sorts of anti-gun people join the page, and there were these threads like 500 comments long. It was nuts how heated the conversation was around this for a while. But we didn't get to 10,000. I don't remember the exact number, but it was close. I think we got to about 9,000. And and so I had to call it off. And I wanted to still do something for the same effect. And I figured, well, if we don't have, I wanted to make sure we had at least, the way I was thinking is that if we have 10,000 RSVPs, we'll have at minimum 3,000 people actually there. And that if we had 3,000, that would be not just a serious crowd, but a safe enough crowd where people could look out for each other, and sort of voluntarily enforce the safety protocol of, unloaded weapons, muzzle down, slung over the back only kind of stuff. But since we didn't make it, I had to call it off. I had just been arrested a month before it was supposed to happen, or maybe a month and a half, at a cannabis rally in Philadelphia, and was locked up for a week under somewhat suspicious circumstances. So I was not in a good position to responsibly organize this. And to organize something like this, not just as civil disobedience, but involving firearms, requires a minimum level of people know what the fuck they're doing. And that directions are out there, that you have leaders and organizers and team members and people taking on different roles. And for one, I didn't think, like, we could have gone ahead with 9,000 people maybe and said, well, we'll get to the 10,000th at the last minute or something. But I really thought it was a hard decision. I mean, one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life was to call it off. And it wasn't like, hey, we were trying to do this and we failed. It was like, hey, we just don't have the numbers, so we're not going to. And that really was the responsible thing to do. But I went on my own, and on Independence Day 2013, I got my shotgun, six shell pump action, and I had it in front of me in the back seat of my car. I had my team with me. I had a driver. I had 2 camera operators. We drove into Freedom Plaza, which is a great ironic site in Washington, D.C., and I jumped out, and I had my shells in my jacket pocket, and I loaded the shotgun, and I racked it, and I said something clever, and I jumped back in the car, and then I unloaded the shotgun. We drove home. It was a 20-second video, and as a result, they sent more men after me than Osama bin Laden. My home in Virginia was raided. We had 2 helicopters overhead, an armored vehicle at the door. The whole house was surrounded by SWAT team members, and this is United States Park Police. So of all the federal agencies for me to end up with a thing I'm kind of embarrassed that I get the FBI Academy rejects.
Yeah.
The
Parks and Recreation.
Yeah. It's like, oh man. Well, if you go see some of my videos, like the cop.
I saw the video. Go ahead.
Well, the choke cop slammed me for dancing. That guy was Park Police. When I do a lot of man on the street videos. This is the other thing I want to say about my YouTube channel. I do a lot of Socratic dialogue, man on the street stuff, where I go talk to strangers, and I have a microphone, and I ask them questions until they figure out why they're wrong about why they support government for whatever issue. And I every time I go in front of the White House, Park Police guys, hey, are you allowed to film here? Yeah, because the First Amendment says I have a right. And I've made a bunch of videos like that, and people want to go. A lot of those are my most viewed. So if you go to youtube.com/Adam Kokesh, or if you find it through thefreedomline.com, my last name, by the way, Kokesh, Kokesh. If you go to my YouTube channel, you sort by most popular, the most viewed. Some of the ones that are the most viewed are, one of my favorites is Adam verbally chokes out, body slams cops at White House, because they came to step to me for filming on the sidewalk, and I just chased them away, and it's a pretty fun video. Of getting in their faces and asserting your rights. Back to the shotgun.
Yeah, with these guys. So here's the thing I want to ask about the whole shotgun thing that you did, because I know this obviously made national news, right? And then there were people saying that perhaps it was green screen. I know that's something that I've seen come up. This really happened. That was really the Capitol. It wasn't a green screen. Yes or no?
Correct.
It was real.
Yeah.
Okay. So
let me say one more story about and I had 3 witnesses anyway.
Okay.
And you could have analyzed the footage, and I'm pretty sure you could have determined that and especially since it came out, well, I don't know, it was real. You can authenticate it a dozen different ways if you really want to. When they raided my home, it was not technically a no-knock raid. It was, this is the police, open up. 1, 2, battering ram. So they didn't give us a chance to answer the door, and they knocked the door down, and then they threw in a flashbang. And my dog, Baloo, who's really just an amazing creature, he's going to the door because he hears a disturbance. Mm-hmm. And y'all know what happens when cops are confronted by dogs.
They shoot them,
it's
unfortunately.
Not cops that did. Yeah. Dogs get shot.
Yeah.
So he was really lucky that this
That's a bad policy. They're going to run across the wrong people with that bullshit. I'm just as a side note, they're going to run across dudes that are going to die for their dogs.
Yeah, if you just had some real accountability and trained police more to de-escalate than to escalate, right. and the natural market incentive would be for, less damage, less destruction, less pain. Mm-hmm. Of course, we'd have better policies like that. But anyway, this grenade went off, and I'm at the top of the stairs looking down at the front door, a little entryway. And as soon as the flashbang grenade goes off, it goes off right under Baloo. Like I saw the flash reflecting because I saw it go off underneath him. I'm at the top of the stairs, flashbang grenade goes off, and it scares the crap out of him. So instead of continuing to go to the door, he runs upstairs towards me. And now I've got my hands up. I've got 3 green laser sights pointed at my chest, and I'm going, Baloo, bed, bed, bed. And he ran to his crate and hid, and that's really what saved his life. And wow. I had my home ransacked. I ended up doing 4 months in jail, and then I have to say the biggest mistake that I made in this particular action was not having the legal strategy sufficiently well thought out to really play it through for maximum leverage in the courts. And this had been just after DC versus Heller, but while the district was still being extremely restrictive in issuing carry license or just ownership permits, I forget whatever term they were using. So while I wish that my case could have stayed a national story as a legal story and really pushed what was going on in DC, I screwed that up in a number of ways and ended up having to take a plea bargain. I basically they denied my bail because they said he has an arsenal of weapons at home, because I had a safe with a dozen guns. I didn't even have ammo for most of them, so to call it an arsenal was really ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But one of the government attorneys convinced the judge that I was a threat and said that I'm the next Adam Lanza, as in Newtown.
Yeah, I think they called you, quote unquote, a very dangerous man or something like that. Is that where that came from? Okay.
Right. And so when you get arrested and you're in jail pending trial, and the judge has determined that you're a threat to society, that you can't be released, you have to at least be held until trial. That means that you are mercy now of the prosecutors. The government prosecutors can just keep delaying and throwing more charges at you and basically keep you in jail indefinitely. And again, this is part of, without getting into too much of the details about how I screwed up. I think I've made that point clear enough. I basically got bullied into a corner and chose to take a plea deal instead of going through with it all the way, because it wasn't a clear enough legal case that we were going to get to play out.
Did you have a lawyer? Did you have a lawyer at the time?
Yeah, I had a combination of private volunteer and public defenders for everything around this. Yeah. But I didn't have one who I had gamed this out with in advance. If I had done that, we would have been a lot better.
Right, because
action. It did contribute. I think while it could have been a much bigger positive force for gun rights, it was still a generally positive force in terms of raising the issue and pushing it a little bit more in DC, which has led to, as I understand it now, at least slightly more reasonable firearms policy in the district.
Yeah, what I would have suggested, I'm not a lawyer, don't want to think that, but if I think you knew this was going to happen, you should have probably, your lawyer could have negotiated this, or maybe you guys could figure out a place that you could go to separate from where you actually live.
Just turn myself in and avoid the raid and because it was brutal. These, again, United States Park Police, they were looking to go cowboy for the day and justify their budgets and all the cool toys that they never get to bust out, picking up trash on the mall at the Capitol. So, yeah, we could. That's definitely one thing I would have done differently, is figured out a way to negotiate turning myself in, even presenting. Like when they did the raid, they said, "Where's the shotgun that you used in the video?" And I said, "Well, since you're going to ransack my house anyway, I'll tell you this one thing. It's behind the headboard upstairs." And they got it, but then they ransacked the rest of the house anyway. And it's like, come on, really, guys? Yeah. And I had 8 people in the house at the time, most of whom were staff or interns and or guests. And they all got zip tied and sat in a room. And it was bad. My girlfriend at the time was in the shower on her period. And they pulled her out of the shower and made her sit in her own blood for a few hours. It was just, avoiding that would have been nice, Hank. Yeah.
Well, you live and learn. So, all right. So let's go. So let's go to a couple of things here. So with that, you spent like 4 months or something in jail. Did you make a plea, or you just basically pled guilty? There was no negotiation here. I think you wound up being a felon, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, there was a negotiation, and it was basically time served, but I had to plead guilty to the felony charge.
Okay, so and I know, like earlier in the podcast here, someone asked if someone who is a felon can run for president. I think you can. I don't think that has anything to do with anything in America. You just have to be born here and be, 35?
35 years of age, natural born citizen.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I'm allowed to run for president, but in my home state of Arizona, I'm still not allowed to vote.
That's
go
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Have you? I know there's a certain amount of time before you can, but have you considered petitioning your rights back? Is that something for the future?
Yeah, definitely. It's a little more complicated than the typical just random single felon charge in my case, and there's the immediate security situation, and I won't say anything about my own protocol other than the fact that I open carry pepper spray as constantly as I can. But there are usually people around me with firearms. You can get an air rifle that's a .357 that you can shoot deer with now that I'm allowed to own. I'm allowed to own black powder weapons, and I'm allowed to own pre-1890 manufactured weapons because they're not legally firearms. And there's a few functional shotguns from that era that are still reasonably practical home defense weapons. So I'm not super concerned about fighting that because it's a huge legal battle. And the result for me is more recreational than anything, is I get to play with guns instead of just worry about the security situation as minimally as possible. And I really think now, so if I may turn this back to the presidential campaign for a minute, because it's actually related to this particular legal circumstance for myself, is that if that's a multi-year process with this campaign, I don't think it's realistic to expect any libertarian to win the general election in 2020. That's almost heresy, among libertarians. Of course we can win. And yes, with a black swan moment, with some kind of massive conversion catalyst where people start really embracing libertarianism or basic American ideals of freedom, yeah, we could win at any time. I'm not, and my campaign is not an educational campaign. We're running to win. We'll be ready to win. But realistically, what we're expecting for 2020 is that we can crack 10%. That if the nominee of the Libertarian Party, whether it's me or someone else, is someone who represents not just this practical message of localization, but in a principled way. You know, the more principled you get, the more practical you get. And so to me, it was, well, I can't put on the ring of power, so what am I going to do? I'm going to throw it in the fire. Mm-hmm. Oh, what do you know? Localization. That's really practical, because if you live in, I'm gonna say something now that's possibly heresy among the gun people too, if you will, because sure. I think now that I've told that story,
knock yourself out.
I think I've got some credibility talking about gun rights.
Sure.
You know, I've been to jail, I've put my life on the line, I've taken risks, I've organized for gun rights. I believe absolutely in the private property right to own whatever firearm you want today and defend yourself however you see fit. That is absolutely inherent to your self-ownership, and I'm not questioning that at all. Mm-hmm. The libertarian position, however, is sometimes mistakenly presented as pro-gun, as opposed to pro-gun rights, as opposed to what it is more fundamentally, which is pro-private property. So while I have a right to own a gun on my own land, and you don't have any right to tell me what the shapes of metal can be of whatever metal that I have on my own land, at the same time, if you want to live on your land and say it's a rule at your house that there are no guns allowed, then that trumps my right to own a gun and carry it wherever I want. I can't violate your private property and your rules on your private property by bringing on a gun. So this is where the localization strategy really is the everybody gets what they want strategy. Now, I'm Jewish, so the sort of rise of white nationalism in the United States today is disturbing, not just at an intellectual but a visceral level for me. But even with that, I still want white nationalists to be able to come together and form their community on their own private land and have their own thing, as long as they're not forcing it on anybody else and they're not holding anybody hostage. They have the right to organize a community how they see fit. On the flip side, maybe you're a socialist who wants to live in a gun-free zone. I'm not going to live there, but I want you to have the right to organize that community how you want on your private land, as long as you're not forcing it on anybody else or holding any humans hostage in that land. Good to go. That's within your freedom. So when it comes to guns, in a sense, I understand that today they represent a unique technological phenomenon. There's nothing that you can do to defend yourself in some situations other than shoot the other guy. And that's the world we live in today, and that's fine. However, where we're going in the future is I think you're going to see a development of taser technology to the Star Trek level. I know this is getting, we're talking about Star Trek, but if you think about where we are with tasers now, instead of just having to touch them against someone, you can now have a shooting taser like the cops carry that will shoot out. Now, and I'm not saying that's the answer. In today's world with that technology, you still want a gun. Mm-hmm. And it still makes sense from a security perspective in a lot of situations to own or carry a firearm. But where we're going in the future is you're going to have a taser kind of thing that would allow you to shoot someone in the pinky toe, and it would disable them so that you could subdue them and zip cuff them and, preserve the value of their life. And it's actually more effective for defense, because if I shoot you in the foot with a firearm, you're just going to be really pissed. But if I shoot you in the foot with a futuristic taser, then you're disabled.
I think a lot of people out there would argue that point, and it depends on situations and all that kind of stuff. I don't think any situation is absolute, and I personally believe there's situations. If you're really fighting for your life, I don't have time to shoot you in the toes, regardless of what weapon I'm using. Right.
No, I'm saying if you miss. So let's say you're attacking me, mm-hmm. right? And I could either be carrying a handgun, mm-hmm. or I could be carrying a super taser.
Okay.
Now, if I have a handgun and I miss your torso, mm-hmm. or your head, I miss the 2-in-1 shot.
Right.
If I hit you in the leg or if I hit you in the foot by accident, you're still going to attack me and I'm fucked. But if I have a super taser and I miss and I hit you in the foot, you're still disabled. That's a better defense weapon. Mm-hmm. Now, in this world where that weapon exists, I still want you to have the right to own a firearm on your own land and use it for whatever you want on your own land. But if we lived in this world with tasers, I might say, hey, why are you carrying a handgun onto my property? That's kind of just, that's primitive. We don't, we don't need that anymore. We have something better. So my point of saying all this is that the reason I'm pro-gun is not because I like guns or that they're this, the be-all, end-all of self-defense technology, but that there are these ethical principles that apply to firearms, that apply to self-defense, that are based on my philosophy of freedom and self-ownership, that are really important to I think tease out. And I think the gun community as a whole to have this slightly more nuanced understanding of what the gun really represents. We're going to be better off than, well, I got my gun so I can shoot the tyrants when they come, and I can put a bumper sticker on my truck. No, it's got to be about more than that. And like you said earlier, Hank, even with the dancing thing, just having the gumption to stand up to authority instead of sit back and take it, whether it's about guns or zoning rights or dancing in public spaces, just creating this culture of we refuse to be governed. Fuck you.
Yeah.
You want to tell me what to do? Fuck you. I'm an American.
Yeah. I think
that's way more important than saying I got my gun.
Yeah. I think, and also I think, look, guns, it's not just for defense. It's not just for hunting. If you really believe in freedom, it's for whatever you want to do with it. Obviously, we have laws. I believe in very few laws, and one of those would be to not for murdering people, but for defending yourself in those situations. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that.
Yeah, you go. Sorry, finish your point.
No, I said other than that, I mean, you could have this gun just because you enjoy shooting it, or you want to. It's a recreational sport to you, or you just like building them. You just want to own them. you just want to have a lot of guns, like someone wants to have a lot of shoes or cars or whatever it is. Yeah, So I don't think you're arguing that for anyone. I know, obviously, you're talking to gun guys. You could very easily get them activated if you tell them that they don't need it. But I think people who are paying attention to what you're saying will realize that. A couple of things I want to get into here. First of all, there's some people, this does look a little bit like, is this a cave that you're in here? People are asking me, man. It looks something like, kind of like a ransom cave. Yeah.
I'll give you guys just a little bit of peek of the roof of the room that I'm in. I can't show too much because this kind of secret. I call this my tire cave. And while my RVs, I have a bus that I travel the country in. Yeah. A really nice 34-foot RV. Normally I do.
Okay, because I feel this is like American Taliban or something like that,
I really should create like a little set here that where I'm like sitting down wearing a camouflage jacket.
If you put on a turban, we're in trouble.
I got a presidential-y question.
Yes. So
what do you say to people that throw out the idea that voting for the third party is throwing away a vote?
I think
that's a common idea.
Sure, I think the opposite is true. Voting for the old parties, for the duopoly, is throwing away your vote. One of the things I did in my last Man on the Street filming session, I ran into a guy. I said, "Who did you vote for and why?" And he said, "Hillary, because of both candidates, she seemed like the better one." And I said, "Both? You mean three?" And he's like, "Well, Gary Johnson didn't really have a chance because he's a libertarian." And I said, "Well, so you're telling me that you vote rather than for who you want to be president, you vote for who you think has a chance of winning. How do you decide who has a chance of winning?"
Media usually decides that for you.
Yeah.
You bought mainstream media. So the mainstream media chose your candidates for you, and you chose from them. Really smart. And he was like, "Oh wow!" And it was like just pointing this. This is what I love with my Socratic dialogue style. When you get a subject who's particularly receptive on a topic that's just right for this, because this was a really easy dialogue to walk him through. Mm-hmm. So. First of all, I think most Americans are are better represented by the Libertarian Party than the old parties. And I would say most human beings, essentially, because we're talking about an ethical philosophy that is inherent to our humanity, that really it should be everybody. And I'd like to separate aesthetics, how you want stuff to look, from ethics, the right and wrong of how you achieve it. And conservatism and liberalism are really more like aesthets. You know, I want to live in a community where people don't do drugs. I want to live in a community where people are religious, or where people are socialists, or whatever. It's how you want it to look, not how you want to achieve it. And how we have been so dangerously fooled as Americans is that, well, the only way to achieve that is through the government system, which is fundamentally unethical. So if I'm the nominee or someone on my platform, you're going to see a significant shift in the messaging from the Libertarian Party, from being it's pro-gun and it's anti-welfare and it's pro-this and anti-that, and you go issue by issue, which is nonsense, because that's playing their game of this being a political message. It's not. It's an ethical message. It's an anti-political message. And if instead we shift to localization, you can have as much government as you want, as long as it's voluntary. As long as you don't force it on anybody else. And that shift can really unify people and bring people together. And Babyface, just one last point on your question here, that is something the old parties do to maintain the duopoly that is really dangerous. I should say, it just has a really bad effect, is that if one of their candidates is significantly ahead of the other, that frees people up to a certain degree psychologically to vote for a third party, to vote Libertarian. And what they'll do is they'll actually manipulate it, either in reality or in mainstream media appearances. And they'll do this anyway because they want attention to the old parties. They want that tension. They want that drama. They want the focus on them rather than the third party option. They'll say, oh my gosh, look how neck and neck it is. And what that does is this creates this really dangerous fallacy for most voters of, well, I like Trump slightly better than I like Clinton. I like Gary Johnson a lot more, but I'm going to come out and vote for Trump because if Clinton wins, it could be a lot worse. The thing is, there are people like this on both sides. And one of the ideas that I really want to get out there for 2020, whether or not I'm the nominee, I think this is a big deal for the Libertarian Party achieving major party status, is vote swapping. There are a lot of households where the man is a Republican and the woman is a Democrat. Obviously, that's a gender stereotype. Could be the other way, but where you have two people, or even two friends, two people who just like each other and say you trust each other, and I'm going to vote for Trump and I'm going to vote for Clinton, so we might as well stay home. But we both would prefer Gary or the Libertarian, so we're going to make a handshake deal. We're going to make a pact, a voter pact, to say we're both going to vote for who we really want in order to step away from this brinkmanship of let's avoid the greater evil. And I could deconstruct this so many other different ways about how this is manipulated and how the candidates
I'm pretty sure that's what happened. But so here's one of the things I think that happened. There were people who didn't want to vote for Hillary and they didn't want to vote for Trump either, right? Including people in the gun community, actually including a lot of people in the gun community. Yeah. The problem is the way that Gary Johnson answered Second Amendment gun questions was very unsatisfying for people in the gun community.
Allow me to apologize now for Gary Johnson being the nominee in 12 and 16. I like him. He's a friend of mine. He's a great dude. He's a man of impeccable integrity, as he proved in his time as governor in New Mexico. But he's not a libertarian. He's a libertarian-leaning moderate, and he was weak enough on a couple key issues that I understand a lot of libertarians and libertarian-leaning conservatives could be more tempted by Trump in 2016, and I can't fault y'all for that.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what happened there, and that's why I agree with, if we really had someone who understood how to get that across to us better. Because look, this time around, that's going to happen again. There's a lot of people who feel even more burned by the fact that they did go vote for Trump, and then we're getting gun control anyway, and they will be looking to make, if you want to call it a protest vote, whatever, they will be looking to vote for someone else, and they might as well use that, especially if, like me and lots of folks here, we believe the whole two-party system is leading us here. I don't know if Babyface, did you go ahead?
Oh yeah, no. Go ahead.
Can I ask you guys a question for a
Sure.
minute here? Because this is now like research for me for my campaign. Because I'm actually kind of curious about what you just said, Hank, about that particular dynamic among pro-gun Trump supporters, and it was by executive order, right? The bump stocks were banned. Is that how it happened?
Executive order to the ATF, basically. Because what happened was the ATF looked at bump stock twice. Actually, I think it was 3 times under Obama, and said that bump stocks are not machine guns.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then Trump asked them to. Yes, he asked them to look at it, and then he gave them an executive order to basically, bump stocks are now machine guns on their own. They don't have to be on the rifle to be a machine gun. The existence of them, no one can own them. People can own machine guns if they have the right paperwork and the right licenses, but no manufacturer, no one in a police department, no one in America can own a bump stock, which is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard of. And lots of guys out here, this is why right now there's a huge backlash, whether you're aware of this or not, in the gun community against the NRA. Because the NRA opened the door to this, saying,
earlier.
They opened the door to this, saying, look, let's just give them the bump stocks. You guys don't care about that, and then that'll be the end of it. And right now, we're also talking about going after suppressors. So yeah. So I don't know.
My question to you is, though, of Trump supporters or of people who voted for Trump in 2016, who consider themselves part of the gun community, I have seen the Trump base torn in the sense that there are some people, and it seems like it might be 50-50. I haven't parsed this out. This is why I'm asking you. But it seems like half of them are personality loyalists to Trump, and that while he can do wrong, he is the disruptor, and he's the greatest thing to happen to American politics in our lifetimes, and he's the most pre-freedom president we've had in our lifetimes, and so on and so forth. And I look at his anti-freedom policies and go, I can appreciate that he's a disruptor, but I can't say that he's taking us in any kind of meaningful pro-freedom direction in policy, and in some ways is going very much anti-freedom. But for guns in particular, for people in the gun community, with the bump stock thing, how much of that was a betrayal by which, you know what, all right, screw the 4D chess. He's not really draining the swamp. He's not really changing, law enforcement policy. How much of the gun community is still Trump loyalists versus feeling betrayed? And of those who are feeling betrayed, what would it get y'all to vote Libertarian in 2020?
Okay, good question. Babyface, you want to go with that first?
I think a lot of his guns-toting base is, well, it's kind of a mix. I think that you got the FUDs on one side. They're saying, oh, who cares? You don't need that anyways. And they're the same ones that say, oh, you don't need an AR-15. Who cares? But I do think there's maybe 70% of the gun base that is saying, yeah, you definitely went against what I voted for. So
yeah,
I think it's a large group of gun owners that feel betrayed by him going after that, and even considering going after suppressors now.
Yeah, and I think so. I'm gonna piggyback on what Babyface is saying, and he's a gentleman in his 30s. I'm a gentleman in my late 40s. So I think we're pretty much across the base. There's lots of gun guys in the chat now, and there'll be people who look at this later that I invite for them to put what they think about this out there. I think as Babyface said, there's a huge number of those people that do feel betrayed, and if the Libertarian Party has someone who we could put any kind of faith in what they're saying, like one of the things that I think that gets to us about the Libertarian Libertarian Party is they're just saying that. They don't really mean it. I'm not saying that you have to, like love guns and have to have 1,000 guns in your safe, but we want to know that they have some legitimacy to what they're saying, that they believe in the Second Amendment and that they're going to do something about it, and we'll go that direction.
At this point, I don't think there's a politician out there, maybe a couple that I know of, that truly believe in the Second Amendment. That's how I feel. I think.
Well, I mean, I think Adam might. I think Adam might believe in it. He was willing to stand up for it, right?
Yeah. Well, what's his name with the eye patch? Oh God, I hate to say that. Dan Crenshaw. I think Dan Crenshaw would be one of them in my book. But yeah, I don't feel like there are any politicians out there that stand for the Second Amendment. They stand for it because that's what gets them the votes, not because they actually believe in it. Yeah. That's how I feel.
Well, then I appreciate that. So I want to say two things, guys, before we move on. Since we've got 40 minutes to go here, let's engage the chat a little bit. And I'd like to ask anybody in the chat and Babyface, if you can interrupt every few minutes when we've got some good comments from the chat, to ask people, do you feel betrayed by President Trump on firearms issues? And how does this affect what you think about voting for him versus voting for a libertarian going into 2020.
Yeah, Jafari Land, I'll just read this comment. Jafari Land said, Reed Henricks just did a good video about Trump. I haven't seen that video that Reed did. Reed's a friend of mine. He's also a Marine. I could tell you that he probably just like spit hellfire on Trump.
Yeah, I'll have to go watch it.
I'm that's who I go train with when I actually do training. But yeah, I think let's hear what those guys think. I don't want to put words in those guys' mouths, but I think we need someone out there that we can believe in. This is not about who becomes president, and I just want to say this. I really think I have come to the conclusion lately, and by lately I mean the last year or so, 2 years, that the gun guys out there need someone in the White House who scares the shit out of them for them to get activated and stand up for the Second Amendment. So to me, it doesn't matter this time. I know I'm done with the NRA. I could tell you that conclusively. And I did vote for Trump. But I could tell you I'm very close to being that no matter what, I'm not going to vote for him because of what I see happening. Since he became president, and what he's still threatening to do, and what we know he's going to follow through with. So I think that lots of us are there.
You're getting betrayed, absolutely feel betrayed. We need somebody that stands up for the second, betrayed. So yeah, I can tell you how our chat's going to feel because we see it every night, or I see it most nights of the week. Hank sees it every night, but yeah, that we're kind of preaching to the choir in that aspect.
All right, well, Hank and Babyface, let me make a direct appeal to single issue voters whose issue is firearms. And most people who are single issue voters are bullshit. But because gun rights are so fundamental to freedom and the use of force and the relationship with government, I really do respect people who make firearms their one issue. It is one that is uniquely qualified to be a single issue.
It's a linchpin. It's a pivot. It's everything. Like I believe in lots of things, above or around firearms. But how you do not have anything you cannot defend.
All right. Well, so let me, as a candidate, now that we have the time, and since we're getting past the sound bites with this good conversation here, about what exactly I am proposing to do for gun rights in America. Because you guys say Second Amendment. I'm like, yeah, 100% all there. Because I believe in the principle of it. I'm not really a Second Amendment guy in the sense that it's those words and that document, because they're not sacred. What is sacred is your right as an individual to own yourself and defend yourself as you see fit. And that is deeper and truer and more universal to the human condition than words written on a piece of paper, no matter how righteous those words could be. So I get that people say, are you a 2A guy? Well, yeah, okay, I'm a 2A guy, but not really, because I don't believe in the document. I'm a pro-freedom guy at a much deeper level. So when you said, are you pro 2A? I'm like, yeah, but I have to explain that. And I want to say, hold on, let me finish, because this is the localization pitch for gun owners and for people who are single issue firearms voters, is that I'm not going to preserve the Second Amendment. We're declaring the Constitution itself a dead letter, that the institution that it created, the federal government. And by the way, we had more freedom under the Articles of Confederation before that. The Constitution historically was a step backwards for freedom. But I'm going to say the Constitution is null and void. So in a sense, there will be no federal protection for your firearms rights. But has the federal government really been a protector of your firearms rights or a threat to it? And I would say it's been more of a threat to it. But more importantly, and this is, I need you guys to just stop and think and really consider this one really important point about localization, is that if we stay under this one government, if we agree to this un-American concept of centralization of power, then we are going to be fighting every liberal in this country to determine national gun control policy. And that's a fight we're probably going to lose in the long run. And I don't want to fight that fight. If we instead embrace localization, you're much more likely to find a state or a county or a community where firearms rights are absolutely, unquestionably respected. So instead of saying, let's argue about this at the national level and convince everybody in New York and California to agree with us on firearms rights, let them have their little socialist utopias and have their failed experiments, because it's going to mean that your rights in your state are going to be more likely to be preserved and relevant to you. But as has always been the case, as Thomas Jefferson said, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And I would rather be fighting a state government than the federal government when it comes to firearms rights. And I'd rather get it even more local than that. And I think that's the ultimate promise that this platform and this campaign offers for people who are pro-gun, is that if you live in a state or an area that's pro-gun, it will become more pro-gun and will be free of all bullshit federal restrictions on how that community determines its own firearms policy.
So how do you feel about, first off, where do you call home? Because you said you lived in Virginia at one point. Where do you call home now?
Arizona. I live in the mountains.
Arizona. So a question that I would have is, what happens to us that live in the fighting states? So New York and California obviously are anti-gun. Places like Montana, where you have to fend for yourself, is obviously very pro-gun. What about us in Florida, where it's 50-50? You got people down south that would love to see them gone. You got people up north that, like us, that we don't want them taken away. We will never give them up.
Yeah, that's the realistic. And let me just piggyback on that. There's philosophy, and then there's what's going to happen in the real world.
Practice.
Yeah, and then that's the realistic thing about dissolving the union, dissolving the government, throwing away the Constitution and things like that. Like, I understand where you're coming from philosophically, and I actually admire that and I respect that, Adam. But the reality of it is, if we actually got there, we would have to deal with that.
Specifically.
Yeah.
That's why I said the eternal vigilance quote is that it's not just, hey, we're going to get rid of all federal gun laws and then it's going to be all peachy keen. No, you still got to worry about state gun laws, and you're still going to have to fight those battles at the state. But now you're only fighting the state. Is the gun community more likely to win when it's only fighting the state government, or when it's fighting the federal government and all the corrupt influences with that? Yeah. So one, it makes that fight easier.
Okay, but that's it. But you see what you're talking about, and I don't think it's realistic what you're saying. Like, if you became president, you're dissolving. This is what we're discussing here, right? The end game of if you actually became president. And I know you already said that it's really not about becoming president. It's about getting a significant vote for the Libertarian Party to change the future of what happens here. But the reality of what happens, if let's say we do that thought experiment. If you do become president and you dissolve the government, we're going to be living in anarchy, and it's not going to be fun. It's going to be a lot. Okay.
No. There's no anarchy. The state governments there's going to be a peaceful, orderly, responsible dissolution process where the state governments are able to carry on all the continual functions that are legitimate.
But what about as Babyface is saying, where we live in Florida, where this is split. This is a 50-50. It's a purple state.
I can address that. But before I address that, let me take a step back, because I think I cut myself off, or we got sidetracked talking about the long-term strategy with this campaign. Is that in 2020 we can break 10%. If we come forth with a radical idea, and by radical I mean not fringe or extreme, I mean radical in the true sense of the word, of striking at the root of the problem, a solution as big as the problem, then we can bring in enough disenfranchised and independents and general typical non-voters to crack 10% and set the stage for 24 or 28 when people are ready for this. Like I said, without some kind of black swan event, we're not going to elect a Libertarian in 2020. We should be fighting for that black swan event. That's what the Libertarian Party is all about. Now, to your question specifically, Babyface, about how that happens at the state level. So in some ways, the federal government in a state like New York is a slight bulwark against encroachment on firearms rights. But generally speaking, New York State, very restrictive gun laws. The best that you get, and I'll correct if you guys are more up on the legality here, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, in a really anti-gun state, or a state that has just very restrictive policies, the only federal law that's relevant to protect your rights as a gun owner from out of state is that you can drive through that state with a firearm locked and separated from the ammo in the trunk, right? So, I mean, you're not getting much. You're losing way more from federal encroachment. So the two answers, though, specifically to that, one is that this is only the first step. Localization is not getting rid of the federal government and having autonomous state governments. Localization means getting government down all the way to the most local level possible, so that ultimately the individual sovereignty of every American is respected, because your community government is voluntary and you can opt out on your own land at any time. You can create your own community. And secondly, you can vote with your feet. So while it might be that we get rid of the federal government and then New York becomes more restrictive on guns, maybe you lose that fight in Florida. I'm not promising a panacea here. You might lose that fight in Florida, and Florida goes anti-gun for a while. But more importantly, people are going to see so many benefits from localization, from freedom in general, from being rid of federal regulations and taxes and all of the corruption at the federal government level, that there is going to be a race to localize. So now, a race, I'm talking on the scale of decades here. If we win in 2024, we take office in 25, a lot of stuff is going to get done. If you want to get into going agency by agency, how does each one work? Some of them very quick, they're gone in the first few months. We handle the records and they're disbanded. With the military, huge logistics process. Just bringing home the troops and equipment from overseas is going to take several years. The CIA, the FBI, some of those resources for law enforcement, we might want to hand over to the states. Some we might just want to liquidate. That's going to take some time. So it's going to be at least a decade before you go, okay, now we have 50 independent states. They're sovereign, they're stable, they've adjusted, they've got their resources from the federal distribution put to use. People are comfortable being a part of the sovereign state of whatever. And then you're going to see states go, well, hey, can we dissolve down to the county level? This localization thing was so good. We already enjoy so much more freedom, so much more of a customized government experience. We want to take it to the next level. So even if you lose in Florida, and again, the culture, the paradigm of how people think is really more important than the immediate legal situation. One of my fellow candidates, Arvin Vorha, a great candidate, former LNC member and LP vice chair, he says, if you got rid of this entire government, and by the way, the federal government is 3 million out of 22 million who work for federal, state, and local government combined. We're not talking about that many employees. But he says, if you got rid of the entire government today, this culture would produce the exact same government tomorrow. And maybe it's not that exact, But the paradigm, if people think we need a president, people think we need gun laws, people think we need taxes, people think we need all the policies of corporatism and regulation, the drug war, they'll demand it and we'll get it again. And in the long run, what we have to do is change the paradigm. And this is where my message to the gun community would say, keep getting out there, be bold, be active, be, without being confrontational, without being scary, be in your face. Get out there and do things like load a shotgun. I mean, I haven't heard of anybody else doing anything really like that since I did it in 2013.
Yeah.
You know, where is the activism changing the paradigm, making sure that when we get government down to the Florida level, that you win that battle?
Yeah. Listen, I agree with you that definitely something has to be done. I think there's obviously it's it's going to be a completely different world than the one that you're imagining. But where's the rest of the Libertarian Party with your particular philosophy here? Are they in line with what you're saying, or you're trying to get them in line with what you're saying? Because I doubt that the folks who are mostly controlling what's going on in the Libertarian Party are planning that if in 2024 or any time after that they are the ones leading the country, sitting in the White House, that they're going to dissolve the government.
Well, you'd be positively surprised, actually. And I mean, let me bare my soul on behalf of the Libertarian Party here and talk about all of the internal conflicts and soul searching type questions that we ask ourselves. But first, let me point out that Gary Johnson is not representative of the base of the Libertarian Party. And it's a big mistake if you think that's what it is. And I can kind of explain this quickly numerically. There are about 1,000 delegates at the National Convention every 4 years who all get to vote for whomever they want to be the vice president and presidential nominees. And at the end of convention season in 2016, only about 60% of the slots were filled. And they were able to fill the rest of the slots after convention season, kind of at the last minute, with Gary Johnson supporters. Now, this isn't cheating. I'm not faulting him for this. This is just playing the game better. Mm-hmm. But if the Libertarian Party turned out more of its grassroots, you'd see it be a lot more libertarian, and we'd be electing libertarian candidates instead of libertarian-leaning moderates or other forms of washed-up Republicans.
Or what I hear is maybe if us gun guys went into the Libertarian Party, we could take those damn delegates.
Absolutely. It would be very
easy. We can control that bad boy.
I would love, exactly. So, well, a big part of my campaign has been organizing delegates over the last 3 years, and we've recruited over 3,000 people, and we only need 1,000 hypothetically, to be delegates, because I know we'll have some attrition over that time. But right now we're organizing state coordinators and regional coordinators, and it's very easy. It's embarrassing how easy it is to be a national delegate for the Libertarian Party. You go to your state convention and they say, who wants to be a national delegate? You raise your hand. And then you go to the national convention.
How many delegates is it for each state? Is that a set number, or does it depend on the state or the size of the state?
It's dependent on the success of the state party, but they end up being roughly apportioned by population because vote total is one of the factors. So when it comes to whether to answer your question more directly, there's a sort of false divide in the party between the radicals and the prags, and that's the pragmatists versus the philosophical libertarians. And the losing strategy for Gary Johnson was, well, he doesn't really believe in what we believe in. He's not really going to inspire anybody to think differently the way that we think differently, but he's a two-term governor. He's got mainstream credibility. He's socially liberal, fiscally conservative. Let's just kind of put him forward and hide behind him. And that's really how that came about. Most people in the Libertarian Party are much more like me, at least in terms of the philosophy, and saying, no, These are absolute ethical principles. You own yourself. The non-aggression principle is ethics. Government is illegitimate as an unethical, coercive institution, et cetera, et cetera. So the people who I've recruited were on board with my specific pitch for localization, going back years. And of my audience, my fan base, I have a lot of fans who are constitutional conservatives. I have a lot of fans who are, anti-war or pro-drug types. So I have people who just enjoy my message, who aren't fully on board. But I would say of my base, it's like 70 to 80% is like totally on board. And then if you go to the Libertarian Party establishment, I laugh every time I call it the establishment because it's the anti-establishment establishment. But the base of the party, the 400 people or so who will show up at every national convention, no matter what, who are the ones who organize their state and county convention meetings. Those people, they all really like me because I've been a lifetime Libertarian Party member since I could first afford it when I got back from Iraq. I've dedicated my life to full-time Libertarian activism for, over 12 years. And there are some reservations about this strategy of saying, hey, let's be less about ideology. Let's be more about principle. Let's be more about ethics. Let's be more about unity, and do that by policy-wise being about localization. And it sounds a little bold, but actually dissolving the federal government in a peaceful manner is more reasonable than keeping it going. And most of them, I would say of those people, very few of them get it right away, but most of them get it after listening to me for an hour.
Okay. Listen, I like you. I understand what you're saying, and there's parts of it that I completely agree with. Here's the problem. Dissolving all these things in America, the practicality of it, this is what people, I think, are looking at, right? What's the practicality of, okay, we actually get the White House and then we dissolve everything? Realizing that at the end of the day, we are sitting in a breadbasket here in America. America itself is prime real estate on the face of this planet. Yeah, we can't, I understand what you're saying about the military industrial complex and sending folks over to die for no reason. I agree with that. But ultimately, we still have to defend this. We still have to figure out a way to stay together. Yeah. Someone has to take charge and actually right the ship, run the ship. It sounds terrible, but someone has to do it. We can't have a goal that if we get someone in there, then we dissolve everything and then that's going to solve what's going on. Most people in the world are sheep and they have to be led by someone. Or am I totally insane? Am I alone, insane?
I'm with you on that.
No. You're not. There's so much to unpack there. Now we've been in this for an hour and 45 minutes.
We still got some time. And you could come back in the future. We have time, and you can come back. But I think that this is what we really have to deal with, because that's what scares people away ultimately. To say, okay, so the end goal of this philosophy is that we're going to win. We're going to get the White House. And what we're going to do is we are going to dissolve the government, even though a lot of us agree that we need smaller government, less laws, etc.
I got to interrupt because it's not, you got to be careful to not misrepresent this. I never said dissolve the government, which would be everything state, local, federal. Mm-hmm. All I'm saying is dissolve the federal. Mm-hmm. So please be careful. Say dissolve the federal. States are still intact, and if anything, they become stronger temporarily.
Mm-hmm. No, listen.
So
okay.
Hold on. You gave me so much to respond to in that, and it is something that you have to think about, because we are so ingrained in this I am intellectually challenging everybody who hears this, or at least most people, to say you have some ideas in your head that really are contradictory to this. But let's examine, how did they get there? Why do we confuse the government with the country? And I know this is a point you guys can really appreciate. We make America stronger the less government we have. And I'll go even a step further in this, in the sense that I'm an American imperialist in terms of Americanism, not the American government. The American government, especially the federal government, is a tumor on our ass of a country. It is not our country. It is not our national identity. We don't need to be united under one government to be united as Americans.
For sure, we've let the federal government get really bloated. For sure, without a doubt.
Right.
Without a doubt, we've let it get bloated.
So the defense. So you raised the defense question, and there's two tricky let me make a couple philosophical points on this, and then one conclusion about the flat Earth. Don't let me forget that. So, when it comes to
don't add the flat Earth. Okay, please don't add that to this.
Nor have I ever been a flat Earth. I'm using it to make a very important point, though. Okay, but I'll come back to that.
Okay.
So the thing about defense, the one really significant objection to this platform that comes from a sort of legitimate logistical perspective is the national defense. And this is something that I could talk about by itself for hours, because as a combat veteran, it's something that's really near and dear to my heart, not just because I was a combat veteran, but specifically because I followed orders that I should not have. You know, I tortured people in Iraq. I participated in sleep deprivation guarding detainees. And that was a violation of the Geneva Conventions. And what I should have said when I was ordered to do that was, hey, isn't this a violation of the Geneva Conventions? Is there a different way we can do this? And then eventually say, okay, I'm not doing it, and face the consequences. And that's the difference, again, between being a warrior and a soldier, and the idea of centralization versus decentralization. So you say someone needs to be in charge, and in some cases to do certain things. Absolutely, that's true. I am suggesting that I should be in charge of the dissolution of the federal government, that I should be the bankruptcy agent.
And what time period do you think that's going to take?
Well, hold on. I mentioned earlier that it would be about a decade for the whole process.
So 10 years.
Probably most of it would be done in the first year, and then there's kind of a long tail for some of the other parts of it.
But let's realize that at the most, by the way everything's set up right now, obviously, you know, you get one term, then you get to run for election to get a second term.
Second term.
Okay. But you just said 10 years, so you're going to change that immediate structure.
Because there is no election. The Constitution is already a dead letter at that point, so we don't get to elect.
So basically, if you get elected, you become a dictator, and you tear up the Constitution and everything else, and write the rules.
Because the only in order for me to tear up the Constitution, at the same time, in order to do that, I cannot be submitting another governing document and saying this is now the source of my authority. So what we're going to do is have on the website before the National Convention next year, by the time I'm ever actually asking someone to vote for me, which is not voting for me, it's voting for this exact plan, we're going to have it written out on the website as this exact plan, and you're going to be able to see agency by agency what happens, and that there is no authority that I would have beyond being custodian of the federal government, which is the title that I would take. But hold on, now you got me off my other thought on,
because it's just an interesting thing. If you look at it, I know it's kind of simplistic the way I'm putting it, but basically the way it sounds to my simple caveman brain is you become president. You're saying it takes 10 years, but there is no re-election.
Hold on, so the I don't think I mentioned this specifically, but one of the parts that happens on day one as I sign the one executive order is that the federal government is of no authority.
Yeah, so this is the executive order to end all executive orders, and in some people's mind, they could see this as worse than any executive orders that Trump has done, anything, worse than whatever Obama did. If you take all the executive orders and lump them together, because, I mean, this is it could be viewed as a pretty totalitarian executive order.
Not if the American people overwhelmingly vote for it. And I'm not going to accept victory on this platform with 34% to the old party's 33-33. Because that would mean that 2/3 of the country voted for there to be a president and only 1/3 voted for there not to be a president. So that would not be acceptable, and I would not try to do that under those circumstances. In fact, I think we're going to need an overwhelming majority. I think it's going to have to be more like 60%. But this idea of decentralization as opposed to centralization, the militia-based defense, means that anybody can opt out at any time and go and do something else or do something more effective for defense. So we have a more effective defense system. This is, again, what the founders advocated for. They were against anything resembling what they called a standing army. They did not want the United States to have a military. They wanted us to have an active, vibrant, engaged, organized, well-regulated citizen militia.
Yeah,
that's a more
ready to organize very quickly. But I also don't think the founding fathers envisioned that what they put together would be torn asunder in 2020 or 2024 and become something completely different. I'm not saying that they envisioned this either, of what we're living.
There's a very important semantic distinction here. I say founders versus framers as very different terms.
Okay.
The founders of this country were the ones who said, fuck you to a king, we'll fight for our freedom, we're not going to be part of your empire anymore. They created a set of colonies that then were sovereign and independent and were organized at first under the Articles of Confederation, which gave them a lot more autonomy. There's a dangerous mythology in the United States that the framers were the founders because they started the corporation that is the federal government. And if anything, you look at what Patrick Henry, the anti-federalists, had to say about it, they were very much against this. The real founders of this country, generally speaking, were against, and again, you could count it, and I'm not pretending to be an historical expert here, but let's just peek behind the curtain of the mythology that has been foisted upon us by government-run schools that don't even explain what government is. So, no, the founders of this country who said we shouldn't have a standing army, we should have a militia-based defense, they saw the Constitution as a huge step backwards for freedom, creating this new central authority, this new concentrated power that they actually thought shouldn't exist. In terms of what the founders envisioned, getting rid of the federal government is the best thing that we could possibly do. So the specialization of leadership, I'm going to sidebar on this since you brought it up, Hank. Sometimes I challenge my audience. I don't know if you've noticed, I have a little habit of doing that because I like to think anybody who's listening to me is at least open-minded enough to change their paradigm a little bit. Sometimes I'll say, how many of you designed the cut of the shirt that you're wearing right now? And everybody looks at me like, what the heck is he talking about? Of course I didn't. I bought this at Walmart. And unless there's one smart ass in the back going, yeah, I'm a fashion designer, right? But the point is, when it comes to fashion and design, most of us are sheeple. Most of us are followers. And you could use those pejorative terms and say, when it comes to fashion, you're a follower. Your fashion sense sucks. You get it completely from someone else. When it comes to architecture and construction, you never put any thought into how your home was built. When it comes to automobile repair, you don't know how to fix your car. You don't know how to build a car from scratch. You let someone else do that. You're a follower. You're a sheeple. And obviously, that's unnecessarily demeaning and negative. Most Americans are not what you said there, Hank. I really do take issue with that.
Okay.
Maybe it's just I have a more positive view of human nature, but we all engage in outsourcing decision making. We all engage in outsourcing specialization of leadership. When it comes to fashion design, I don't need to design my own shirt. I'll go and get this at Walmart for $12. Someone else can design it. I'm not even going to question them. It looks good. It feels good on me. It works. Cool. And similarly with government, for those of us who are paying attention to this, it's incumbent upon us. I don't want to say it's a duty or an obligation or responsibility or any of that crap, but it's a chance for us to have leadership in the political realm and say localization is the way to go. It's the everybody gets what they want strategy. And we're going to show you how this immediately makes your life better. So I want to make one point about my platform before I get into the flat earth thing, and that'll be my last big point.
Okay.
Before you guys want to get any last shots in, or we want to check in with the chat. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm going to tell the chat right now. Start throwing up your questions, comments, or whatever.
Yeah,
so I'll let Babyface check those out. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so one thing that I didn't get to mention, because we've had so much fun talking about so many other big topics and stuff related to the gun community, is what it means to be the bankruptcy agent of the United States, in that I have a fiduciary responsibility to repay the true creditors of the federal government. Now, we owe, and I hate that because it's not we, it's the federal government's debt on paper is what? What's the recent number? It's some trillion.
Yeah.
Some tens of trillions of dollars.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, is it 12, 13 trillion? I'm
Whatever.
not sure. Yeah.
Whatever. That absurd amount. First of all, government debt is intergenerational child abuse. Because when you're born into this country, you are saddled with a share of the national debt that you never had a say on. You never had a voice in whether or not that money was going to be spent in your name and whether that debt was going to be attached to you. And most of the debt of the federal government is owed to foreign banks, foreign corporations, and other banking type institutions where the debt can really just be written off. And I'm not saying there won't be consequences and upheaval, but it'll be good consequences in terms of overthrowing the tables of the money changers.
Yeah, we're getting like 22 trillion is what I'm seeing from in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 22 trillion. Thank you. So the federal debt is going to largely be written off. Some of it is going to be determined to be legitimate debt, and as a bankruptcy agent, we will do our best to repay those specific debts that are legitimate to individuals or small businesses or whatever. But the debt to foreign governments and the large banking corporations, and this is why they'll never let me on mainstream media right here, all of that debt is being written off. It goes away. It's not a legitimate debt. You can't force people to pay for something that they didn't have a say in and that they didn't agree to. So as we liquidate the assets of the federal government that do not get spun off, like I said, the VA will get spun off as a it's not a private institution. You could call it that, but I would like to see the Department of Veterans Affairs become a public trust, where every veteran in America gets one ownership voting share and gets to set the policy through voting on a blockchain. Not that difficult to achieve. We can make that transition happen. But for the buildings, for the absurd piles of weapons, for some of the lands, for the things that we liquidate, what we do with those funds, it's my responsibility, like I said, to pay back the true creditors, and it's the American people. I mean, what taxpayer has not been by the way, taxation is theft, if I didn't say that earlier. Right. What American has not been stolen from as a taxpayer an insubordinate amount by the federal government?
Well, for your entire working life. Listen, without a doubt, the America that we live in, the whole world that we live in, and the government structures that exist around the world, not just in America, they're a construct, right? Without a doubt. Money, construct, right? It's not a real thing. Currency or whatever, it's not real. Okay, so there's constructs around us, and that's why I understand exactly what you're saying. We're having like this kind of thought experiment, right?
Let me just finish this one policy point.
Okay.
The liquidated assets go to Social Security, spun off as a public trust, and that's how we pay back the American people. That was the end of that point.
Yeah. Listen, the thing that I think about this, without a doubt, like what I was saying there, I think we're living in a construct. I mean, we could simplify it to say we're living in the Matrix, but it's kind of the blue pill, the red pill thing, that we have going on. We're living in a construct already. That's what modern civilization is, and what you're proposing, I think, like if it falls through exactly that way, which in reality, even if you got there, it's not going to fall through that way, right? Because there's this thing that if you ever looked at the first Jurassic Park, where I forgot the name of that weird actor that's in Jurassic Park. He says like life.
Yeah,
life
I know
happens.
exactly what you're talking about.
Life happens. A whole bunch of things.
Life finds a way.
Life
No,
finds
the
a way.
line is life finds a way.
Yes, exactly. So, I think that's the ultimate thing that we're dealing here. We're already living in a construct. If you try to strip that away from people, there's a lot of people who don't really want to wake up to it. There's some of us who awake at a certain level, and there's all kinds of complex things going on here that we're talking about.
Hey, Hank,
Yeah.
can I, just since we're coming up on 6
Sure.
o'clock,
Yeah.
are we okay to go over by about 15 minutes?
I think we can go over, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to propose just a quick agenda, if you don't mind, to wrap this up, because I do have to go. But I want to make my flat Earth point.
Okay.
I want to do a lightning
flat Earth.
round.
Yes, okay, flat Earth. All right.
I want to do a closing remark, just my closing plugs.
Okay.
And then I want to show you how life finds a way at Freedom Farm. Okay.
Jeff Goldblum, by the way. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Right.
All right. So for the first point, the flat Earth concept. At one point in human history, most people on Earth believed that the Earth was flat and the center of the universe. And then they made all these complicated equations to explain what they were observing in the motions of stars and other celestial bodies and planets relative to the Earth. And it didn't really make sense. The patterns were very complicated. And they had to make lots of very complex equations to explain their observations.
Okay.
Then someone came along and said, hey, maybe the Earth is round and it's not the center of the universe. And then all of a sudden, all of the equations got very simple because, it's all elliptical patterns and, everything makes sense. And a lot of people resisted because they were stuck in this flat Earth paradigm, and they had invested so much thought and energy into these equations that they couldn't just give it up and go, it can't possibly just be that simple because I've spent all this time. I've put on all this effort. I was in the military for 20 years. I was a civil servant for my entire life. My dad's been a cop for his entire life. My brother was in the military. How could it possibly be simpler that we don't actually need these institutions? I've committed so much. But if you just go, no, people should be free, because the flat Earth in this analogy is the current paradigm of government as a coercive, centralized authority being good and necessary and righteous. And the truth is, we should be free. We should live in a world where our individual rights are respected, where all human relations are free of force and fraud and coercion. And the way most people wake up to libertarianism is very similar intellectually from this process that humanity went through as a whole, from flat Earth to round Earth being the paradigm. And for most people, it was, well, the men in fancy hats say that the Earth is flat, so I guess it's flat. Well, now the men in fancy hats say it's round, so I guess it's round. It's that appeal to authority, specialization of leadership, and all that. So similarly, with this concept of ethics behind libertarianism, I would invite everybody who's listening to the show right now, who's not yet a libertarian, to consider this flat Earth, round Earth analogy and go, wow, it really might be that simple. Now, even listening to me for 2 hours like this, you're not going to go, oh, I get it, because that's not how people realize that they're libertarians. It really happens in quiet contemplation. It happens in, reflecting on your worldview for yourself and running these new ideas through all of the various filters of your experiences. So I encourage people, especially for whom this might be the first exposure to these ideas, to really consider that. Now I get in my shameless plug for my book.
The book comes out.
This is a book I started writing when I was in jail. If you want the ultimate primer in libertarianism, this is it. It's 100 pages, so it's very short. It's free in every digital format possible, including audiobook, at thefreedomline.com. We sell them as cheap as we can get away with on Amazon, so please check that out. Please share it. If you can get the digital version, just check out the first few chapters, and I guarantee it'll change your perspective. So on that note, the last thing I'll say is that similarly, in this flat Earth, round Earth comparison, where you go from a false overly complex model to a true simple model. The Libertarian Party being about socially liberal, fiscally conservative, pro-gun, anti-tax, pro-this, and that's the no, localization and ethics and unity. This is what brings Americans together in respect for each other's freedom, as opposed to fighting over the one size fits nobody solution. All right, so with that, let's do a lightning round, shall we?
Yeah. Do you want to open this up to the folks out there, Babyface? What kind of comments are you seeing right now? Let's let some people get their voices in here. And feel free.
It's just they're kind of just talking amongst themselves.
Yeah. I know there's some dissent out there. Look, ultimately, I think if you want to make this look like the Matrix, I think that if you want to do the Matrix analogy on this, most people are going to choose the Matrix ultimately, right? And that's the thing. And the reality, I think, is somewhere in between. Because of the nature of who we are as human beings, we need to live in a construct. That's just the bottom line of who we are. That's why we form societies.
Yep.
That's why we do it. We need to live in a construct, whether of our own design or of someone else's design. Listen, I know that when Joe was telling me about you, he said, this guy's really interesting. Joe, you didn't lie. You didn't lie whatsoever.
Thank you, Joe.
He did not lie, and you are very interesting, man. And I could see us definitely continuing this conversation. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things here that people have to absorb. So I would agree with you. I think if folks out there if you want to explore this more, it's very easy to follow Adam, right?
Yep.
So follow him. Yeah.
Read the book.
Read the book up there.
Like I know people hate reading books these days. I know you got it's a free audio book. It's only 3 hours. It's only 100 pages. But you still have to, if you really want to do this, if you really want to open your mind and adjust your paradigm, you have to stop and
let me ask you this, Adam. Let me ask you this. What kind of stuff have you had? What kind of assistance have you had in terms of the red pill and the blue pill in opening your mind? And I'm not trying to make fun of you. I think you've been doing some of this in the cave. I think you've been doing some things. What kind of things out there for the folks who need some help along the way?
Well, which red pill? I know people use that term to mean so many different. I love how that's the men's rights movement seems to have owned red pilling, and I don't really have a problem with that. And I've seen the red pill documentary, and I get the whole pro men's rights perspective.
Right.
It's a very important one. But if you mean how did I wake up, right?
Yeah.
How did I form my worldview?
Was some of this assisted by chemical, whether natural or otherwise?
Well, I will say cannabis probably saved my life when I got back from Iraq. I went to the VA and told them I was having trouble sleeping. I walked out of there with 5 prescriptions after talking to a shrink for 5 minutes. 3 of them had suicide listed as a side effect. Instead of taking them, I smoked cannabis to control my PTSD symptoms when I needed to, and that may have, in and of itself, saved my life. I'm also, generally speaking, a big fan of psychedelics, not as a party drug or party drugs, but as a meditative exercise, as a therapeutic exercise. My friend Kevin Matthews in Denver just got mushrooms decriminalized there, psilocybin mushrooms. The therapeutic value for those with PTSD are huge. For any veterans listen, just because I know there are a lot of veterans always in the firearms community or the gun community in general. A lot of people are concerned about smoking pot and losing gun rights, but I've seen way worse shit happen to individuals who took the prescription meds from the VA. Whatever it is, don't do it.
I think prescription meds are way more dangerous than anything that exists out there in the world naturally. Yeah. And, and that's coming from someone who, my wife's a pharmacist, I just heard her come in here. That's what's gotten me so fat. But I think it's a pretty destructive thing, and I've seen it in lots of ways. And for someone who's a veteran, man, I never served. I have lots of friends who did,
That means you're smart enough to learn from the mistakes of others.
Well, yeah. Listen, I've had a lot of friends who have, man, and I'm glad that this is your path instead of, unfortunately, the path that lots of other veterans have taken, and we don't have them here. I would rather have you here talking to us about these things, and we could have this conversation and bend our minds a little bit, than, unfortunately, not having some of those good dudes who aren't here anymore to talk about it.
I would just encourage every veteran out there. Cannabis is so legal in this country, it's not even fun to smoke anymore. But you can get it safely off the record. The only reason to not smoke cannabis as an alternative to psychotropic medications given by the VA is if there's a specific one that you need, or you're at a job where they're going to piss test you. And I mean, I have a friend who was smoking cannabis to avoid the psychotropics, and then he got a government job where he got piss tested, and now he's like, well, shit, man, to control my anxiety, I got to take these pharmaceuticals, and now I have headaches and I don't sleep well. I'm not suicidal yet, but, I'm slightly more in that direction. And for any veterans, who might be considering taking their own lives, warriors are still needed. Don't believe it.
Yeah. And reach out and talk to someone. My information's out there. If anyone wants to talk to me, I talk to people all the time. Reach out and talk to someone. Find something to do. I think idle hands and idle minds are incredibly destructive. Definitely find a mission, and I think that's what you've done, Adam. I don't want to, simplify your life in any way, man, after you've done everything that you've done in your life. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, and for sure, I'm really glad you used that exact language, because if there are any veterans listening who are sitting on their disability and drinking themselves into bottles and watching TV all day thinking you need a mission, I got you covered. Send me an email, adam@thefreedomline.com. I mean, you could help this production, anything, and help me out. I could help you. I love being an activist, who's always helping other activists, supporting independent media and all that. And so let me just say, one thing here now. I mean, unless you guys have any other.
I just wanted to quickly add something from American Gun Chick. She's in here, so we've been blessed by the goddess American Gun Chick. So Joe says, as Adam said, these aren't overnight concepts. This was a lot to take in for most people tonight, just new approaches to think about and consider outside of our current broken dead-end system. You know what? I 100% agree with Raquel.
Yeah. We packed. Thank you, Raquel. Yeah, and it's good to hear that you're here, and I know Raquel from before she was American Gun Chick, and it's been beautiful to see how her and Joe as a team have accomplished so much, and congratulations to both of you for getting where you are right now. So, man, this has been a wild ride. We have really covered a lot in just over 2 hours, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity from you guys. But I gotta say to the audience, for anybody who is still watching right now, that it's not enough for us to have the technology without conscientious use. So for the lifestyles of the Locked and Loaded podcast, put your money where your ears are. If you got to the end of this episode, you're definitely someone who values the production that Hank and P are putting together here. And they're not getting corporate sponsorship. And because they're having people like me on, they probably never will.
We've got like Franklin Armory, which is like a pretty, they're pretty rebellious gun manufacturer out there. Thankfully, we got them. So we appreciate that.
It's not Procter and Gamble.
No, that's not happening.
People are advertising on Fox and MSNBC and CNN. No, these guys got to hustle, and they rely on an active and engaged audience. And I know this from my own experience. I'm getting started again with Adam versus the Man on Monday. For people who want to, please sign up for my email list at thefreedomline.com. We're going to be, doing 2 videos a day, 5 days a week, until we can raise the money through Patreon to get a regular podcast going. But for now, you're listening to this show, support this show, share this podcast, and support whatever independent media voices that you value. Support Raquel and Joe, support American Gun Chick, support activists. I want to say put your money where your mouth is, but it's really, put your money where your eyes and ears are, and support the people who are bringing you valuable information, whether it's by sharing their stuff, donating, getting on Patreon, getting the perks with whatever it is that they're doing for fundraising, or helping them out like Joe, just, helping make this interview happen. I'm so grateful for that. Yeah. So finally, before I go out and show you this tree, and that'll be the grand finale, one more time.
Yes, of course.
thefreedomline.com. 3 words, thefreedomline.com. So now I'm going to unplug my phone.
All right, let's take a look here.
We're going to go outside, and I kind of have to be careful because this is not just private property, but for legal reasons, a private property. And I can't show you or let you guys see everything that's under development or in the works here.
By the way, still daylight out there. That's surprising to me. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we're working on doing with this property is developing it into a veterans retreat, and making it a place where veterans, who are looking to get deprogrammed from being killers and becoming regular human beings again, processing that trauma and breaking free of the military conditioning, to have a space here where vets can come and be off grid and be in nature and really feel safe to do let's just say yoga and meditation and exercise and eating well and other things related to that I probably shouldn't mention on the record. So that being said, one of my favorite features of this property is these juniper trees, and you can see this one behind me is really, really special. And I can't make my shot bigger, so I'm like squinting here to look in to see exactly what I'm showing you guys.
Okay, so it's falling.
Actually, let me. I can turn the shot around here. Okay, here we go. So what we had here was, you see, there's the base of the tree with the roots, and you can see it got knocked over, and the rest of the tree is sitting here, and it's actually completely suspended off the ground from when I trimmed the end. And you can see from the tree rings here that when it was knocked over, it was probably over 100 years old. But if I just zoom out here for a second and back up, you can see why I call this my survivor tree.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I've got several dozen of them on my property here, and they're quite common in the area. I hope you guys
for the folks listening on audio, it's a fallen tree, but it's still alive.
Well, more so than that, and I hope you guys appreciate this, because I've never done this for any interview before, but you made me think about it when you said life finds a way. And this was basically a tree that when it was knocked over was probably 35, 40 feet high, and it was knocked level. But the roots just kept growing into the ground, and the branches that were on the top side became the new main trunks of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you say life finds a way, not only does it remind me of this, but it reminds me of what I love so much about this place, and that you can't have a bad day and come out and look at this tree and not think, I'll find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, man. That's pretty cool. I've never seen that. I don't know if anyone else out there has, but I've definitely never seen it. So I'm going to thank you for sharing that with us as we before we wrap up here. So we've got a couple of minutes. I want to let Babyface, who's been very patient and hanging out here in the background. Do you want to tell the folks how to follow you on social media, Babyface?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir at this point, but baby_face_p on Instagram or babyface_p on YouTube. We got tons of content coming out, lots of videos on gun stuff, 2A things, so they'll be coming down the pike pretty soon. So
yes, thanks a lot.
Go tune in.
Yes, absolutely. Check that out. Make sure you check out Adam Kokesh. And Adam, I really want to thank you, man, for for taking the time out of your day to come on here, and hang out with Patrick and myself, and explain your position, all of that stuff. I really want to thank you for that. You obviously did not have to do it, and we appreciate it. I know it's not an easy thing to do.
No, I'm running for office. You have to. No, but I appreciate the opportunity, and particularly for what you guys represent in the gun community, being able to speak to the gun community with you guys, at least as a sort of proxy, and address a lot of those issues, and I think it's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate that, and you've been not just fair and insightful as interviewers, but also I think helpful in creating a unique interview with this that really took us to some deeper places that I hope are going to be really good for the audience.
All right, great, awesome. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to thank everyone for hanging in there with us. I'm going to drop just everyone stick in right now. I'm going to drop the end. There we go. There goes the end. Make sure you subscribe, okay, guys? Thumbs up, ring the bell so you can be notified when we put up the podcast. It's out on audio so you can listen to it from your car, when you're working out, whatever you're doing. Thanks so much. We'll be back Monday. I want to thank Adam Kokesh, Babyface P, all of you guys out there. We're out of here. Peace out. We'll see ya. Bye.